Here we go, episode 19 of Red versus Blue. My name is Mike Stark.
And I'm Keith Curry.
And we're back. We got the news of the week, the political news of the week. This is the place that you can come and get it all in one short little piece, and then you can go enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your weekend, whatever you got planned. So let's start off with media news, and I'm glad we're doing this because you are such an expert at the political stuff and always bring such insight. And media is something I know a little bit about, so we can talk about this. Ronna, go.
Well, the former Republican National Committee chairperson, Ronna McDaniel, cut a $300,000 a year deal to be a talking head on NBC. She had previously been scheduled to do an interview on Meet the Press, which was a pretty rough interview. And then following the interview, Chuck Todd basically said, I'm sorry that you had, Krista Welker, whatever her name is, that you had to put up with this, that our bosses should never have allowed this to be on our pristine network here, et cetera, et cetera. And 4 days later, Ronna McDaniel was out of her job at NBC. Now, to her credit, Ronna McDaniel did admit that she was taking one for the team when she was lying about the election fraud, and that she no longer believes that the election was stolen. But it's a cautionary tale for Republicans because she joins a long list, starting with Jeff Sessions and Mo Brooks and Rudy Giuliani and Mike Pence, Tim Scott, Lindsey Graham, of people who have seen their reputations and their futures utterly sullied and in some cases devalued to nothing based on their association with Donald Trump. And she's now sort of in that milieu. And what it tells you is that there is stink that attaches to being part of the Donald Trump cadre. And it is hard to wash off. And I've told people that Republican candidates not yet born will be answering for Donald Trump generations from now. And this is, just the latest in what I think is going to be a long line.
Yeah. And the outrage, most of the outrage came from, not surprisingly, the NBC network, although Chuck Todd was very vocal about it. But the MSNBC portion of NBC, which is definitely liberal, they unanimously disliked this choice and made it clear in their commentaries the next day. Now, the first thing is, if something like that would have happened at Fox News and their anchors started going off about some hire, would those people still have jobs? And I don't think they would. I think they would have been escorted to the door shortly after maybe the next commercial break. So that says something for MSNBC. The one thing that struck me the most, and, MSNBC is liberal, but they do have, like Michael Steele, they do have a Republican voice on there, as opposed to Fox, who they don't allow any liberal discussion of any consequence on Fox News. Yet the anchors were outraged.
They protest too much, I think, sometimes, in my opinion. And Fox does have Harold Ford Jr., who was a Democratic congressman from Tennessee. He is the House liberal. And then on the Republican side, on MSNBC, you have Michael Steele. Now, Republicans will say Michael Steele is a rhino, and Democrats will say, Harold Ford is a Fox sellout. So neither side is particularly happy that they are the advocates for them. Right. And it's important for NBC to have legitimate Republican views expressed on their network. The problem is that when you're an election denier, that's not a legitimate view. And that's the issue here. But let's just talk a little bit about hypocrisy now, because MSNBC is the network that employs Al Sharpton. Let's remember the Tawana Brawley scandal, where he got a young woman to lie about being assaulted by police, nearly caused a race riot in New York, and attempted to, shake down the city for money over this. He was fined by the courts $800,000 for basically this lie, but yet he's got his own show at MSNBC, and nobody over there seems to think a thing about it. Some of these people who are protesting perhaps protest too much, and the hypocrisy was, I think, visible to all on the right. Now, that's not to say that election deniers, need to be validated, because that's just simply wrong. And a very disturbing thing is that at the Republican National Committee, for the 60 people that they fired, to be rehired, the question is, do you believe the election was stolen? Now, how can you be a effective political operative if you are required to profess things that are fundamentally false? How can you go out and organize a mail-in ballot campaign, which, by the way, 80% of Californians voted by mail?
Right.
So how are you able to effectively do that when you have to adhere to a philosophy that says the election was stolen? It's very debilitating to the Republicans.
Okay, I'm going to address the Al Sharpton thing and understand I am not an advocate for Al Sharpton. Al Sharpton has done a lot of things that I don't like and are either unethical and maybe even illegal at times. However, as Lawrence O'Donnell pointed out, the difference is that you should never hire someone close to the crime. And Ronna McDaniel was close to a crime. She's named in some of the legalese involved in, especially, I think, Michigan. Now, Al Sharpton has all sorts of problems. And again, you're right about all of that. But he wasn't close to a crime that nearly took down democracy, if you know what I'm saying. So that's the difference. But I do have a solution to all of this. You're going to like this. We put Al Sharpton on Fox News, and we hire Ronna back at NBC. And then you have fair and balanced news.
Well, that would certainly make entertaining television, I will tell you that.
And at the end of the day, isn't that what all those networks want? They want entertaining television more than anything else. So
they do. And I'll tell you, actually, an idea like that, and maybe those are not the correct two people to do it, but exposing people to different points of view is the critical deficiency right now in media. Mm-hmm. There was a poll recently, and what it showed is that Republicans who watch only Fox News, 100% of them believe the election was stolen. If they get their news from CNN or NBC or a major network, only that number drops to 79. Now, it's still a ridiculous percentage, but it shows you the importance of where people go to source their information and the importance for there being a diversity of viewpoints where they go to get it.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the VP race. There's been a little bit of rumbling in that area.
Well, there's a poll out about who Republicans would like Donald Trump to pick. Now, at the end of the day, they're going to like whoever he picks, and he doesn't really look at the polls. But it showed that DeSantis had 18%. Nikki Haley had 17%. Tied at 15 were Vivek Ramaswamy and Tim Scott. 7% was Tulsi Gabbard, and 6% was for Kristi Noem. Mm. Now, that's a pretty broad swath of people, and Trump is going to ignore all of that and pick who he wants. But it shows there's no real consensus among Republicans about who should be picked. But my friend Jonah Goldberg, who writes for the LA Times and for the National Review, had an interesting column this week in where he speculated that Donald Trump might use the vice presidential pick to insulate himself from a further impeachment. In other words, pick somebody, Marjorie Taylor Greene comes to mind, who would be so bad that the Congress would think twice before they impeached him. You know, after his experience with Mike Pence, I'll just tell you that that's perhaps not an unrealistic strategy.
Wow. Now that brings a whole different look to the campaign. But you don't think he's going to look at any of those candidates that show up in the polls?
Well, the smart thing for him to do would have been to pick Haley. He's not going to pick her because he's decided he is not going to appeal to the Haley voters. That's been a campaign decision. DeSantis is obviously the most popular amongst a broader swath of Republicans and is more ideologically attuned to Trump, but he is in a pissing match with DeSantis, and so despite him, he won't do it. I think probably Scott and Gabbard and Noem are still in the race with God knows who else. Both of the candidates are pursuing strategies that are not in a traditional way aimed at victory or aimed at broadening the coalition or aimed at doing what you would normally do if you think you want to win the election. They're all aimed at satisfying either the extremes of their bases or of, satisfying, in the case of Trump, his personal whom I pissed off at this week. And there's more news on the vice presidential front.
Okay.
Nicole Shanahan, who was apparently the former wife of one of the founders of Google, has been selected by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as his running mate. She's a liberal Democrat from Northern California. That means that RFK has decided that his path to notoriety, I won't call it victory, but his path to keeping himself relevant between now and November is going after progressive votes. It's yet to be determined which ballots he's going to be on. The Biden campaign has taken him very seriously. They have an entire campaign operation set up to basically pound him just as bad as they're going to pound Trump. And we'll see if they're able to do it effectively. But we have our first formal vice presidential pick.
Okay, let's talk about Trump's economics at this point, because they have changed over the last week. You know, we were here last week and it was a completely different canvas than it is this week in terms of his economics.
It is. A week ago, he was facing the need to put $477 million up as a bond for his case in New York. The judge lowered that to $175 million and gave him an additional 10 days to do it. He seems to be on track that he'll do that sometime early next week. And then Truth Social went public. And a company with $3 million in revenue that lost $49 million in the fourth quarter of last year now has a valuation of $11 billion, making Trump a billionaire, as long as the stock doesn't tank over the next 60 days.
No chance of that, right?
Well, I went online today and I read the disclosure for that securities offering, which runs close to 600 pages.
Wow.
Including several disclosures relative to Trump himself. He opens himself up now to regulation by the SEC. The board gets a background check by the New York Attorney General's office. And there is an entire ecosystem of class action lawyers ready to bring a lawsuit as soon as the stock tanks. And everybody that I've talked to that knows anything about the financial markets believe that the stock is going to tank sooner rather than later. So there's no significant underlying economics to keep it up. And if you're putting your money into it, I'd buy a lottery ticket because you probably have a better chance of winning with that.
And he can't draw anything out of that for 60 days or something along those lines, right?
Correct. I think it's 30 days, 60 days. The board could give him an authorization to do so. If they do, they will get sued. He has so much stock, but as soon as he sells it, it's going to cause the stock to tank.
Right.
And so that's the real problem, because that will generate a class action lawsuit on behalf of shareholders. Now, he could pledge the stock as part of the collateral for making the bond. I mean, there's other things he can do with it, but you'd be kind of foolish to take that stock as collateral.
This is all money that's going away and has nothing to do with the campaign. Trump has the purse strings on the Republican money now. And the Democrats held a one-night event that raised $25 million. So economically, is this a fair campaign?
Well, the Republicans are going to be highly disadvantaged. Not only was Biden able to raise $25 million in one day, not only is there close to $1 billion of identified super PAC and union money that's going to be dropped on the Republicans nationwide, but the New York Times did a report this week. $100 million of small donor contributions have been used for Trump legal fees so far. Now, imagine what would happen if that money were available for the campaign, for Republicans or for Trump. So he is going to be so far financially disadvantaged. The Biden campaign today announced they're opening 30 offices, campaign headquarters throughout the state of Michigan. If they invest their money in the ground game, which they need to do, that's really going to give them the advantage in turning out voters. Now, I will say this. We talked about the air campaign, and Biden has invested $25 million in talking about are you better off now than you were 4 years ago, and showing empty shelves during COVID. That did not move the needle. He has not yet found a media strategy that eats into the Trump lead. Now, he is going to have all the money in the world. There's going to be a separate campaign run to beat the heck out of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So the Republicans will be financially disadvantaged going into the race.
And the Democrats can afford missteps in terms of finance, because if they make a misstep, they have plenty of money to correct it, I would assume, at least politically, in terms of the mechanics of it all.
They do. And my view is that this is going to be a 10-1 or greater Democrat advantage but by the time we add it all up after November.
And how are you feeling if you're a down ticket candidate in the Republican Party? How are you feeling right now?
Elections and campaigns came out with an analysis and says Republicans are not as bad in the House as you might have thought, given who's won primaries and who's filed and who's running, which open seats, et cetera. But I would feel very concerned if I were a House candidate because I think the Republicans are going to lose the House. On the Senate side, Republicans are actually going to do very well. They need to take the Senate by several seats because the next 2 election cycles after this one, a lot more Republican seats are up for defense. But for this election, I think the Republicans are going to do well. I think the Democrats are going to do well in the House. And if you're running for the legislature or for a local office, it's going to be very disconcerting because you'll be pressured by the party to be a Trumpster and you'll be pressured by your community not to be. And there'll be $1 billion of media, particularly if you live in a swing state, that's making everybody angry about everything. It would not be an election that I'd want to be a candidate on the ballot.
And besides the pressure that they'd put on the candidate to swing a certain way, they'd have no money for him either, right?
No, they won't. I mean, here's the thing. The Republican National Committee, Michael Steele famously said, the RNC doesn't do policy. We do mechanics. So you depend on the RNC for get out the vote, voter identification, registration, all of those mechanical things. And increasingly today, people who vote by mail, getting that process up, running, working, organized, and having, election integrity that's real election integrity. If you have everybody who's a cultist who has to say that I believe the election was stolen, Laura Trump came out and said, we've got to master mail-in ballots. And then they ran a plethora of clips of Donald Trump saying mail-in ballots are bad, evil, and we should never do them. And it always leads to corruption. So when you're stepping on your own message like that, the RNC is not going to be able to do the mechanical things that they've historically done very well to compete with the Democrats. Okay,
let's talk about briefly the importance of one vote, because, voting is always, that's the bottom line when it comes right down to it. At the end of the day, all of this money, all of this stuff, everything that goes on, it's the person stepping into the ballot box and placing the vote. And you've got a little situation where a few votes made a big difference.
And they're still counting. So in California, Congressional District 16, which is San Mateo County, Anna Eshoo is leaving the seat, so it's an open seat. A Democrat finished relatively well in first place. But in the race to see who's going to be second, twice during the counting period, the difference was 1 vote. It was 1 vote on Tuesday. It was 5 votes on Wednesday of this week. Today, as we're speaking, it's an 8-vote difference, but it could very easily swing the other way tomorrow. When I last looked at it, there were 800 votes to count yet in San Mateo County. So, this is going to come down. This has been in single digits for 2 weeks now.
So, granted, it's a local election, but still, it's a total illustration of how important your vote is. Just keep that in mind when you're thinking about not going to the polls and voting.
Well, and it's a congressional district. So now all of the candidates here happen to be Democrats, and it's a Democrat district. But think if one of those candidates were a Republican and the other one was a Democrat, and it was a seat that could go either way. The entire control of Congress could hinge on it literally this year. So it's a very, very, your votes, everybody's vote is just very, very important. And you don't know which race it's going to be the one vote that decides.
What you brought up is an absolute perfect illustration of how one vote could go all the way to the Congress.
That's right.
It's almost scary in a way, but that's the way our system works and the best system out there. So,
power of each vote.
Okay, I think we've hit everything, haven't we?
I think so. It's been a busy week, but it'll be a busy week next week.
It's a busy week every week. Thanks for joining us on Red versus Blue. Subscribe to the podcast. We've got new addresses, so make sure you get the right address. We're on Spotify. We're featured on Spotify, and we're also on iTunes, but we've had a change of address there. So at the moment, I think there's 2 places you can get Red versus Blue, and eventually one of them will go away. So it's a little confusing, I understand, but search us out because this is the place where you can get a week's worth of political news in a real concise form, and subscribe to our Facebook page and subscribe to the podcast. Thanks for joining us on another edition of Red versus Blue.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.